way you feel like you, and you have a narrative about yourself. You know, you like some things about yourself and you don't like other things. And you think that there's a very strong feeling that you could, if you accept that you're looking for something, that it has something to do with you, with how you are. I often say you're not enough this and you're too much this.
Right.
You know, that's the way I know it's a completely simplified, dumbed down way of putting it, but if it's very simply, in one way, that's kind of how it is. People feel, I got to cut down on this and build up on this. So you're constantly kind of tweaking and adjusting yourself, and you feel that what's being looked for is something to do with you, and you just need to get that right, you know?
Yes.
And the amazing thing is, it is nothing to do with you at all. It has nothing to do with the way you are or the way you think other people think you are, because all of that is just simply a story, just a narrative. But it doesn't feel like a narrative. It feels absolutely real.
Welcome to Letting Go and the Greatest Secret, where we explore the end of your suffering and the beginning of lasting happiness. I'm Hale Dwoskin, and today I'll be joined by Kenneth Madden. Kenneth Madden hails from the west coast of Ireland. He describes himself as a speaker rather than a teacher, as fundamentally the message he shares is that what is sought is nothing other than what appears to be happening, and not something that can be taught, approached, or known. Therefore, the communication is a sharing, an open friendship, as opposed to a teaching. Kenneth has held meetings sharing a clear and uncompromising non-dual message since being interviewed on Conscious TV in 2010. Even though the end of the person there had nothing to do with the story, let's just briefly touch whatever it is you feel like comfortable sharing about Kenneth pre-ending of the personal center.
That is the crucial part of it, that it has nothing to do with the apparent falling away. So the logical thing is the person thinks, well, what was Kenneth doing, or what did Kenneth do to bring this about? Because that's the way life works. You know, it's very linear, it's causal. How did you, get to C? Tell me A, B, and then we get to C. So the difficulty is the story is irrelevant, completely, totally irrelevant, because any falling away appears to happen despite anything that went before. I've told the story several times. I don't mind telling the story, but I always have to preface with that. It doesn't matter. Like we could easily continue the interview without any of that, and it would not make any difference at all. So
yes.
The condensed version is that about let me see now, about 13 years ago, maybe more, 14 years ago, apparently, because we can get into that later. But I went on a meditation weekend, and a friend had recommended it to me, a good friend of mine. And it was just, I was in the minute, I was kind of just finishing something, my studies, and it was just kind of timed perfectly because I was just finishing. And she said, oh, this thing will be fantastic. I think you'd really enjoy it. And I said, I always really trusted her judgment, and we had a great friendship. And I thought, I'll go for that. I think I'd like that. And I think that's an interesting aspect of it. I didn't have any expectations of it. Didn't even read anything around spirituality much. Buddhism, had very, very little kind of knowledge of it. It was just something to do. It was something different. So I had no expectations of anything, no real concept of such as enlightenment or anything like this. So on the second day, I was just, there was just what was appearing to happen. So it was outside, and I was looking at hills across a lake, and there was just the hills and the lake. So suddenly everything that I'd always it was suddenly new, but it'd been the same hills and the same lake I'd been looking at for 2 or 3 days. But suddenly it was new, and it was the first time I was looking at it. So that's about as close as I could come to in words. And I bent down and tied my lace, and it was the first time I'd ever tied my lace because everything was new. So this was just indescribably mind-blowing. Boom. So it continued for the meditation weekend continued. I think it was 5 days, but that was kind of irrelevant in one way. Everything was new at that point. And I went back to where I'm from, and it was like an explosion. It was no experience up to that point was in any way comparable to it. So then it was obviously the question is, well, what happened? What happened to me? What is this state, or what is this way of seeing, and so on. So then that's when Kenneth started digging in and searching and reading and exploring and all of that stuff. I suppose almost a classical kind of searcher, you could say. And what was, I continued meditating, but what was interesting was from the very beginning, I felt there was nothing to do, it was nothing to do with the meditation. Somehow I felt, and the reason I felt that was what was seen was just simply, there was just this, you could put it. I think that's the words I would use. There was just this. There was just, when I say this, I mean just aliveness. There was just whatever was appearing to happen. So what I kind of mulled over was, if there's just this, how can I approach this? I can't approach this, and nobody can approach this because they're already this, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So that was that was kind of in the background while some of these things were explored, like meditation and mindfulness and all of this kind of stuff, and spiritual groups and listening to all sorts of speakers. And I'd say that all carried on for about a year. So I suppose you could say that I felt that I was back again. I felt like Kenneth again, but something was completely different also. And I had to find out what that was about. There was nothing else that was as important as that. I had to discover what was glimpsed, you might say. And then I listened to tons and tons and tons of people, read tons of books, did all the usual stuff. And then I heard The Open Secret by Tony Parsons about a year after that, probably 2008 or something. And that was boom. That was it then, because when I saw him on YouTube, I saw a YouTube video, only a short one, about 10 or 15 minutes. And then I saw it, and then I watched it again, and I watched it about 10 times. And every time I watched it was the first time I watched it, which really echoed of the experience of the thing that had apparently happened a year ago. And that's when it all made sense then. It was the first time someone had expressed it like that I hadn't actually gotten anything or gained anything, and that it was all a loss. It was a loss of an artificial separate self. And so it was an apparent loss because I was never really there. And that was really it. I mean, that was the kind of, that's the story, if you want, just condensed down. It's completely irrelevant. And the part, obviously, that people latch onto is, oh, you were meditating.
Right.
And I'm very clear that it has nothing to do with meditation, because I wasn't doing anything. And in fact, if you're unfortunate enough to be meditating, when something like this happens, you will obviously then think that the meditation brought about something, which isn't the case at all. And that was it, really. I went to see Tony around that time. He was fortunate enough that he was in Dublin around a couple of months later, and I went to see. And when I saw him, that was just a couple of minutes, or it wasn't even minutes. It just confirmed immediately. Okay, this is what I saw on the YouTube, and it's just a resonance, and it's an incredible sharing. It's an incredible sharing. That and there is no Tony Parsons. There is no. It's from nobody. It's from nothing. And at that time, then it started to be shared here. I started to share it because I felt like nothing else could come out of my mouth. Really, It was like the only thing worth saying or worth talking about. So I was doing photography at the time, and I started a blog, and very quickly the blog became about this, very quickly, really. So it was a photograph with some text, and then a very good friend of mine, Frank, since then, Frank, who speaks now as well, and people would be familiar with Frank, Frank McCaughey. He had kind of recommended me to, I think it was Conscious TV, and that was it. It just kind of, I just started sharing, and it seemed that just that people, there seemed to be questions directed at me, and that was it really. Then and that's I guess that's the way it kind of unfolded, and had meetings in the UK after that. Some people invited me over there, and just had meetings in Ireland, and over and back a few times in the UK, and that was it. It was shared ever since, really. Yeah, that's the story.
That's a great story.
It's a great story, yeah.
Yeah, but people tend to hear the story and they make it about them, how they can use the story to get the same thing or to figure out what the person experienced. But that's
essentially when someone asks you, they say, "What happened to you?" What they really want to know is, "What I want to know what happened to you, so I can make it happen to me."
Right.
Essentially, yeah.
And is that a total waste of time?
It's just a question. It's just something that happens, but it's irrelevant. Nothing happened to Kenneth. It was the apparent falling away of a sense of being separate. It didn't even the falling away didn't happen because the sense of being separate was always an artificial addition. So essentially, this is nothing appearing to happen. But when you feel like a person, it feels like something happening in time and space, and there's a living in the real. So then in that reality for the person, something happened to Kenneth. It had to have happened. And now they imagine that Kenneth's in some sort of non-dual state, or speaks from a non-dual place, or it's some concept of what's being said. And then that's just what's heard when Kenneth speaks. If someone feels like a person, they will feel that something, maybe Kenneth has something that I could get or would like. So that's what that question comes from. And it's fine. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what the question is, because it's a sharing that can resonate, and it's not being suggested to a person. So the person's not being spoken to when in a clear communication at all. So if they have any kind of question, is not a problem. Nothing is a problem. It just is a question that appears to happen. But the question won't get an answer that feeds it, because the individual is not recognized.
So it's nothing to nothing as opposed to person
well, all
to
there
person.
is nothing. Yeah, all there is nothing, and nothing is everything. So it's just a sharing then, as opposed to somebody who's speaking to somebody else, recognizing someone and speaking to them about, a thing called oneness, which they can find. So essentially all of that method of communication, all it does is reinforce that you are an individual and you can find a thing called oneness.
Right,
So
right.
all it does is it's a teaching of ignorance, really. It's not bad or good or anything. It's not anything. It's just what appears to happen. So that's it. There's a sharing. It resonates. Doesn't resonate. It's not with you that it resonates, because you're an appearance. You, when I say you, the individual, actually can do nothing but reject what's being said, actually, and rejects it by the individual rejects it by turning it into something, or just of moving away from it, saying that's nonsense, I don't want anything to do with that, or even engaging with it but turning it into some sort of concept.
Yes.
So
yeah, that the habit of turning things into concepts is a core habit, isn't it, of the imaginary
the person is the person is living in the known. So like I always describe the person as like a closed loop of knowing. That's just a term. I'm not even sure if I borrowed that from someone else. I probably did, but it's a closed loop. I think it's a nice way of seeing the individual is just a closed loop of knowing, but it's completely artificial, and that's the way the individual feels that there's a world out there and there's a them in here, and they're looking out on the world and they're interacting with it, and that the more they know the world, the more they can control it and create a better, safer place for them. That's the lived feeling of protecting. It's like this bubble of me. So everything is in the known, and what's being shared is that what's actually yearned for is completely unknowable, totally and utterly unknowable, because it's so immediately just what is and isn't. Any knowing is just an abstraction that comes from a sense of separateness or separation.
Yeah, it's hard to respond to that because there's really nothing to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, there are questions that people ask all the time, like, so now what do I do about my life? As though there's your life. There's actually such a thing as your life.
Yeah, that's a lived reality for people. It's not an idea. There's a real lived sense that they're in there and they have a life. So there's life, and then there's me with my life. And it's a lived, contracted sense of separation that really mostly goes unquestioned. And then it's excuse me, in the story that's continually reinforced from when you're a small child, that you have a life. Of course you have a life. You go to school and you're taught you have a life and you have choice and you have volition and so on, and what you make of your life is a result of the choices you make. And so then it's all very linear and logical and sequential, and that's the lived reality of feeling like a person. Time is absolutely real. I'm in the present, I'm moving into the future, and the past is kind of behind me. And so the questions that arise tend to often be of that sequential, logical nature of always back to, but what am I supposed to do with that, or what can I do with that, or so you're saying there's nothing I can do, or is one very common one for even at the end of a big long talk would be, is there anything that I could do? Like just even a small thing?
There's got to be something, please.
There's got to be something. Please give me something I can do. And that's okay. Like, and I'd often, actually, a lot of the times, not always, but a lot of the times that when I start speaking in the first few minutes, I point out that there's no real intuitive, no really kind of brilliant, smart question, and as opposed to something that's a stupid question, really, because it doesn't matter actually, and it's just there to be asked. If someone's, that's what's coming up for them. Is there something? Is there anything I could do? Then that's what's coming up for them. That's right. Okay, and people kind of say sometimes, do you not get bored of being asked that question, and of course it's the first time I've been asked that question, because everything is new. It's not, the person thinks in repetition, and everything is new. So if that's the question that's been asked, that's what's been asked. But what will really happen though is there's a sharing, and there'll be a question, and there'll be an answer. And it's not about the answer or the question, it's an energetic resonance, but it's sensed very quickly when it's a very strong individual energy that's coming, and that there's no openness to what's being shared.
Yes.
So that's sensed very quickly, and usually the whole conversation is kind of wound up kind of quite quickly as well. There tends to be very little said then from here, because it's very clear that it's not being heard at all. Right. So then it often tends to be just, and then it all just kind of collapses.
Yes.
And that's very frustrating for the person. Like, it's a stunning communication that belongs to nobody, absolutely nobody. It's nothing to do with Kenneth at all, nothing to do with any of these other clear, uncompromising speakers. The character is just the character. It's nobody's communication. There's no authority whatsoever. And it's just shared from nothing, and it resonates as it resonates, and there's an openness or there isn't,
Yes.
and it's boundless, totally boundless, and you're being seen as nothing other than whole and complete, which is a lot of people recognize immediately that they're seen as nothing but oneness, or nothing being everything. Them as an individual isn't recognized. So that's some people, it's an amazing energy to some people. They're completely amazed by that. Also, the flip side of that is the feeling, the energy of feeling like a me is very confronted by this, extremely confronted, does not want. And you often have people just, they'll actually leave very quickly. They leave in the first 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. They just go. They don't want to hear it at all. They think it's spiritual, or they think it's something else. And then you get kind of everything in between. You get a resonance, and then also a simultaneous sense of being confronted, a kind of push-pull thing.
Yes.
That also happens, yeah.
So basically the path has nothing to, there is no path, and the path
There's no
has
path, no.
And the path is the apparent path if someone's still identified in any way with time or story, the apparent path, again, it's the same thing, has no bearing on this.
None whatsoever. You could put it another way. The way you feel like you, and you have a narrative about yourself, right? So there's a narrative there about how you are. You like some things about yourself and you don't like other things. And you think that there's a very strong feeling that you could, if you accept that you're looking for something, that it has something to do with you, with how you are. I often say you're not enough this and you're too much this.
Right.
That's the way I know it's a completely simplified, dumbed down way of putting it, but if it's very simply, in one way, that's kind of how it is. People feel I'm not enough this and I'm too much of this. So yes. I got to cut down on this and build up on this. So you're constantly kind of tweaking and adjusting yourself, and you feel that what's being looked for is something to do with you, and you just need to get that right,
Yes.
And the amazing thing is, it is nothing to do with you at all. It has nothing to do with the way you are, or the way you think you are, or the way you think other people think you are, because all of that is just simply a story. It's just a story, just a narrative. But it doesn't feel like a narrative. It feels absolutely real when you feel separate.
Yes. And so time only exists within that story, doesn't it?
I more often than not now, I would say I describe things as being real and unreal.
Yes.
And that's not without its problems, because if you say that, then the person says, "Oh, that's fine, I'm real then. So I'm real then. That's okay. I don't have to worry about the rest." So you could say that time is real and unreal, because we agreed to meet at 9:00, and we clocked in at 9:00, and you know what 9:00 means in your time zone. I know what 9:00 means, and it's a function in the story.
Right.
But there's no independent thing called, it's a concept, or it's real in its appearance. But as a person, it's not like, we don't treat time like, oh, it's an appearance. No, time is absolutely real. Like, it's a real thing. So everything is real. It really is living in the real. Everything is real for the person. Time is real. And when you're talking about time and space, you're talking about the same, like it is a continuum, so they're two aspects of the same thing, essentially. Yeah. So it's an appearance. Yeah. Everything is an appearance. When it's indescribable, when you no longer feel like this separate entity in the body, and there's just the body and there's just what's appearing to happen, it's totally indescribable. It's completely indescribable. But it's completely ordinary and obvious, because that's how it appears to hide, by already being the case. But those things that we thought of as so solid and real, like time, and they're just an appearance then. So that you still know what time it is. You still know how to read a clock. You still know what someone's saying, "Oh, I'll meet you at this time tomorrow." But the realness falls out of everything. It's just a play of light, or if you could put it that way. Yeah.
Each new, it's not an individual message, each new stream of words that comes out, it feels like it kind of starts in nothing and ends in nothing.
Yeah, you
And
can
it's
be
a
that
full
too.
stop.
Yeah. It's again, it's back to the communication. It's not nothing to do with Kenneth, but when it's a communication that is agendaless and is a sharing without, and is not to another person. There's no sense I'm speaking to another person. It's got a quality that's very hard to describe. It's boundless, and I like the way you put it. Actually, it's like its birth and its death are in the one thing, and the reason it's dying as it's been born, because it's actually something being nothing and nothing being something. So it's there and not there simultaneously, and that's what
Yes.
makes everything new. But that newness is not perceived by the person, and that's what's yearned for by the person. Is they live in that subject object reality of I'm speaking to someone else, I'm speaking to someone else, there's you, there's that, everything is an object to them, and that's very dissatisfying. So the newness isn't seen, the something they feel is missing.
Yes.
And that's essentially the sharing. Then the sharing is very simple. It's that sense that there's something missing actually is what's yearned for, is actually just what's appearing to happen already. It's simply just already this, whatever's appearing to happen. And then that can resonate. That it's amazing when there's an openness to it. It's just boom. It can just be boom. Someone can hear a video, and it's just that's it. And and others are curious. There can be just a curiosity about it, or some sort of openness to it, or there's all sorts of kind of ways that people hear it or engage with it.
Yes. So but it does feel like talking like two separate realities. There's the reality as seen from a person, and then there's, I don't know. I talk about the other one as a reality. There's just what is,
Yeah,
which
you
has
could
nothing
say
to do
that.
with the
Yeah,
person.
you could say that. I know that who is it that says that? Tony Parsons, I think, speaks about two realities. I never
Yes.
really spoke like that, but I liked that description as well. I thought it was quite nice. And that really, like, the reality of the person is whatever amount of people, 8 billion people in the world. There's 8 billion realities, really, because the reality you're in is your reality, which you take to be real. And in that reality of what are other people, there's kind of an agreed on thing called reality. So there's this reality that we're all agreed on, but then we're all fighting over it too.
Right.
I mean, that's not reality. You're in a different reality. Get with reality.
Right.
So all this energy about that. And then, like you said, then there's another possibility, and the other possibility or other reality is just simply that there's just energy, there's just what's appearing to happen, and that energy, computers and microphones and Kenneths and Hales and so on, and it's all just energy. That's all. It's very simple.
Yes.
And that's always there. So what's yearned for is actually always, it's actually all there is. It's not that it's always there, it's all there actually is, because the sense of being an individual kind of appears to arise in that. So what the person actually yearns for is completely inescapable. It's never left them.
So, this is something that I hear all the time, and from this context, it's meaningless, but I want to bring it up anyway.
Yeah.
So basically, this whole thing that many people worry about free will and or predetermination, both of those are just part of the story, aren't they?
Just part of the story. Yeah. Yeah, the free will is just an aspect of feeling like an individual. Free will is choice, so there's a sense of being a person who has a choice over their actions, so it's just it's a feature of feeling like a person. So of course then there's no free will because there's no person, there's no individual to have free will. So it's just in the story that you feel like a person and I have choice over my actions. And it feels real. That's the way it feels. Like I'm going to choose to raise my hand. So there you go. That hand wouldn't have raised without me choosing to raise my hand. Do you know? But then what's been shown really is that so there's raising of the hand, and then there's just the addition then of you that you decided to raise your hand. So so there's what appears to happen, and then you're kind of adding yourself to it after it happens. But that's ludicrous to most people. That's nonsense. Like most people would agree there is free will and it's a real thing. Just as they would fundamentally feel, well, there is a person. You are a separate person. So that's what
Right.
it all comes back to, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
It reminds me of when I was much younger. In college, tripping, and something called trails. If you move your hand, the hand it seems like it's there's this following image, and the way most people are living life as a person, they're looking at the trail. They're never looking at at what is. Is that
Yeah, you could
accurate?
say that. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's a subject object reality. So they see things, they see other people, but they don't actually see them as they actually are because they're other people. They objectivize them. Even this is a great guy or a not so great guy or whatever, and it's all just a concept. So they're meeting an idea they have of what is another person. So they actually never meet anyone as they actually are. And it's the same for anything: a flower, a stone, whatever it is. They don't see it as it actually is because it's in that kind of prison of them and it. It's in that subject object reality. So it's very dissatisfying, actually. Nothing is seen as it actually is. And it's living in the real. So it's everything. It's something, the no thing is not perceived, and it can't be perceived. Actually, you will never perceive no thing. It's not possible. And all you will do is just make something out of nothing. Like even silence, talking about silence and sitting in silent meditation or having moments of silence is making something out of nothing. And it has a very artificial kind of feeling to it. I think a lot of people sense that. And really what's yearned for, and in that reality, I'd often think about people. I'd often express that people really there's this fundamental sense of there's life and there's death. There's duality, there's life and there's death. So there's life, and I have my slice of it. I have my little slice of the pie. And there's death, which is this big black kind of blobby ominous thing called death. And it's total story. There's no big black thing called death and a different thing called life. There's just what appears to happen. And what appears to happen is nothing being everything. So life and death are not two separate things. There's just nothing being everything. So there is no death, actually, or life for that matter. There's just what appears to happen. Energy.
Yes. Yes. But even energy is just a word.
Yeah, one of the things about energy, it's a nice word in the sense that it's not laden with all sorts of kind of
Right.
meaning and things. So, the difficulty with with any pointing or with any communicating about this is, people are continually trying to get something out of what you're saying and conceptualizing what you're saying. And so the more neutral the terms sometimes, the better it can be, you know?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah. But it really doesn't matter. I don't get hung up on the language at all, because it's totally energetic. It really doesn't. It's really beyond the language altogether. And the only thing when it comes to the language is I just try to avoid terms that are confusing for the person, or may in some way kind of feed them or give them something to kind of latch onto.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh, that reminds
yeah,
me of this. So I'll just put these two together and then everything will be
yeah,
okay.
yeah. Or also having some sort of concept of say a thing called non-duality or oneness or whatever, and there is no non-duality. But having this idea, and then if I use certain terms, then it's easier to kind of fit what's being said into that conceptual framework and not really hear what's being said at all.
Right.
Which, it's amazing actually. Some people still manage to do it, sit through an hours and hours of a meeting, and still could come away and think, "Oh yeah, that was lovely," and it's pretty much the same as,
Oh,
you know,
right.
and you're going, "Oh my goodness, really?" Did you hear anything that was said? Seriously, it's amazing. It's beautiful, really. Yeah,
Lester Levinson, my original mentor, used to say, you hear maybe 10% of what I say, and in my experience, it's so much less than that usually for people. If they're coming at all from the sense of a person trying to get fixed.
yeah. Well, it's always going to be a carrot, though. Like any suggestion about what people are looking for is going to be perceived as a carrot, and there's no way of changing that. That's totally fine. It's an aspect of the communication, and then it's just that there is this openness, you could say, an openness, but it's not your openness. It's nothing to do with you, but there can be just an openness and a sensitivity and a energetic readiness, you could say, to what's being shared, and bang, it's just when it's heard, it's heard. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Each time you say bang, it feels like something explodes and
Yeah.
disappears.
Yeah, I know it can, and it's a little bit dramatic that too, actually, the whole boom, but it's just an aspect of the communication, because it really is indescribable. It's not anything. It's not the bang, and it's not the, like, everything I say, someone could also say, but it's not that either, Kenneth. And then Kenneth will go, yeah, obviously it isn't. Because it is. That's the paradox of the communication, it's not any kind of way, or it's this way and that way, you know. So whereas the person is that kind of dualism of, well, if it's not good, it's bad, isn't it? You know what I mean? It's this play of opposites. When that, so everything that they collapse, really,
Yes,
and it can be, it's logical, and it's totally illogical. It's totally mad. It's sane and it's mad, because it's everything.
yes,
With the person kind of tends to live in the linear and the known and the logical. So
yes,
it's kind of tends to be, it's this and it's not that. It's this and it's not that. And that's what you see reflected in the world. You see a not so much comfortableness with the gray, maybe. It has to be continually kind of, and we see a very polarized world in which one is trying to overpower the other, and getting increasingly polarized and polarized.
yes.
Yeah.
Mm,
And that's also just a play of light. That's what's appearing to happen.
yes. So, what is unconditional love?
It's not knowable. It's a term that points towards already what is, which is energy, which is nothing being everything, which is all embracing, and wants for nothing, asks for nothing, is completely agendaless, And that's a term that sometimes I would use and others sometimes use. People think when they hear the term unconditional love, they think of it in relation to the meeting of needs, interpersonal love, and then they try to apply that to it. And that's not what that term would refer to. That's a different kind of want and a need for interpersonally.
Right. That's
Yeah.
conditional.
Yeah, conditional. Yeah, it's unconditional. Unconditional, and it's already all that appears to be. And it's the collapse of opposites. Yeah. It's this play of light. Yeah. Where it's everything, there's nothing that isn't it. Whereas that stands in contrast to the person who is this energetically feels that, this is good and positive and I like this and I don't like this. So this is it and this isn't it. Right. So there's almost like this spinning wheel of trying to integrate things that are good and that I like and are pleasurable, and to kind of rid yourself of things that are uncomfortable and painful. So that's that, and that's what that stands in contrast to that whole kind of energetic loop of being a person, of pulling in pleasure and pushing away discomfort, and that half alive feeling that one is it and the other isn't. So when there's no longer a sense of feeling like a person, the incredible thing is there's nothing that isn't unconditional love, because if pain arises, that's what's appearing to happen. Pain, discomfort, anything unpleasant that happens, it's just energy. And then that whole struggle of pushing all that stuff away continually, kind of this constant agitation and fight with what appears to happen, just totally collapses. And if pain is happening, pain is happening. And if pleasure is happening, pleasure is happening. That's what's appearing to happen. So it's very simple, very ordinary. It's already the case. Like the suggestion that's been made is that actually what you're looking for is simply already the case. It's simply just whatever's appearing to happen. Sitting on a chair, a thought, a feeling. If that's an uncomfortable feeling, then that's what's appearing to happen. And that's the boundless freedom of it. Everything is boundless, totally boundless. And if it's boundless freedom, it will also appear to be bound.
Yeah, it's the collapse of all apparent opposites.
Yeah.
Most languages, well, probably all languages, based on apparent opposites.
Oh yeah, the language doesn't matter. Again, like the language, people can get hung up on the language, and even some people go as far as to speak in non-dual language. And I think this is terribly important. The person appearing as Kenneth would,
right.
I mean, I'd get a shoe over the head from my wife if I started speaking like that. I mean, that would be. I get a clout because, I mean, it's just, it doesn't matter, I mean, the words I, the words me, it's just a functional thing that appears to be like that. Like speaking in a way that tries to reflect some non-personhood or something. It's just ridiculous, really. It's just, it's totally doesn't matter. It doesn't make any difference. This is not about something that's knowable in any way at all. It's totally beyond understanding and knowing. And it's very ordinary and very obvious. It's just already what appears to be. So it really is an energetic resonance. Really, really is. So what's been suggested can just resonate, and it doesn't have to. Obviously, this can appear to happen outside of any communication, and does actually. People stop feeling like separate people, and they hadn't any exposure to so-called non-duality or anything like that. and maybe they don't even come across it again, but that sense of being a person can just appear to collapse, but it's all energetic. Yeah.
And it's not coming from anyone either, is it?
No, it's that artificial overlay appears to collapse, but it was always artificial. And it's already the case. Like, there's already no separation. There's nobody who's separate at all. There's nobody who's not already what they're looking for. But then they report themselves to be separate, and you see that they may feel like separate people, and that's what appears to happen then.
But even when they're reporting that, that's still not true.
Yeah, it's true for them. It's true for them, as in, like, there's a really felt feeling of being separate. So they're truly, I mean, most people are they're truly reporting, well, I feel like a separate person, and then that's what is happening there. That's what's appearing to happen. And that's all anyone can do, really, is say, well, I hear what you're saying, I kind of resonate with what you're saying, but I still feel like a person. Well, then that's what's appearing to happen. Like, why would anyone do anything else? Why would anyone say, play a game of, I get what you're saying, Kenneth, I don't feel like a person, and pretend to not be a person? You know what I mean?
Right.
Which also kind of happens as well. But I mean, why bother?
Right.
Why bother? Like, who cares? Who cares? If you feel like a person, then that's what's appearing to happen. It's not right or wrong. It doesn't mean anything. It's just what's appearing to happen. And most people do feel like a person until they physically die.
Yeah.
And then that's the end of the apparent individual. So that's the good news. We're all going to die.
Right.
I knew there was some good news we were going to get to somewhere. Who said this is a hopeless message?
I sometimes put titles for this. Maybe I'll make this one's titled "Good News, You're Going to Die."
Yeah, maybe. Sounds like a good one. Yeah. Yeah. Have you heard the good news? Yeah. I mean, and that's what we're all like, when there's such a fear of death in Western society, certainly. And really, like, it's a fear of your absence. It's a fear of your own absence. And the big joke is, the divine comedy, if you want to call it that, is you're not even there. You never were. You didn't even start. So it's but that's it, really. I mean, it goes to the heart of everything. It's what all the noise is under all the noises. This is really what people are meditating on and cogitating about, and this is illuminating the heart of the matter, really.
Yes.
And most people don't want to hear it. Of course not. Of course they don't. Why would they?
Right.
Why would they want to hear it? I mean, to hear there's no. Why would you want to hear there's no you? You know what I mean? It's like, no, thank you. Utter rubbish.
Right.
Utter rubbish. Bye, bullshit.
Right.
And that's what you see. Like, people hear, most communications, basically people engage with it in a manner of, well, what's in this for me? Like, what am I going to get out of this? And when someone speaks, usually it would be, say, I do 1 and 2 and 3 day residentials or whatever. And if it was the normal kind of way of communicating at the beginning of these, I would say, well, this is what I'm suggesting, and this is what you can get out of the day.
Right.
And it's complete opposite of that. Like, it's amazing. It's nothing. I mean, that's the way the world appears to function. And that's the way people kind of engage with things. Yeah, what's in it for me? What can I get from this? And that's okay. That's just the way it is. And then they can hear this, or they can't hear it, but it's shared.
Yes, yes.
And it's wow. It's so different.
Yes.
It's so different. It's amazing. I'm as stunned. I'm totally and utterly as stunned as when I first heard it. The first time I ever heard it, and it hasn't waned at all. Because it's not a thing, it's not a concept, it's not like knowledge that can kind of get stale after a while, or and it's nothing to do with me either, so yeah.
So one of the concerns that people have is that, it's funny, I'm going back to the story to ask a question, but is there life after the death of the apparent person?
There's no after or before, but it's a logical question, because it's a completely logical, understandable question, because the person feels that there is life and there's me with my life. So I have a life.
Yes.
It started when I was born. Although really, we think of it as when you were born, but really you were in utero, you were in your mother. So you started before that. But you were in the womb, and you were in the womb, and you began, and you were born into the world. And I recently was listening to Alan Watts, and he said if you described it as being born out of the world, it's a much more accurate description, actually. I thought that was nice.
Yeah.
And then that's it, really. You feel then you are a person and you have a life. So life started, and then you will die, and life will finish. So the question then is, what's after that then? It's very logical. But then this is a completely different way of seeing them, when you no longer feel like a separate person who's seen, and that there's just you, as in there's just the body, mind, and as there always was, thoughts and emotions and whatever. And it's very obvious that there's just energy. That's all there is energy. And there's no before or after, only in the story. And there's actually nothing even happening. This is something appearing to happen. So then the question of what's after is no longer relevant, because it's clear that there's no time for there's no before or after. So all of that collapses, and death then is really, the words I would use around it is just simply an energetic shift. That's all it is. So nobody actually dies. Or you could, back to what we were saying in the beginning about things being real and unreal. So the real is that you die. You die. The body decomposes. It stops functioning. The heart stops pumping around the body. The body, it stops. All the organs stop, and the body goes into decomposition. So that's the real. The unreal is that what you were was never the body. Blood and bone and piss and spittle. It's not this, it's the energy that lit it up, if you want to put it that way.
Yes.
So what you are actually doesn't die, because what you are is energy, and energy can't be created or destroyed.
Yes.
So death becomes an appearance. That's all it is an appearance.
Yes.
So I see people die regularly, and it's a tremendously emotional time for their loved ones and families, and it's explosive. Death is a very explosive thing, and people often would report or say that their whole sense of reality is completely shaken by it. And what, from how I would describe it, is just, it's all energetic. It's energetic. That's what it is. It's an energy shift. And nobody actually dies. But that's quite a dissatisfying answer for the mind, because the mind is still in that linear knowing, and so that doesn't really answer the question at all. So it's like, well, no, I still want to know what's after death. What is it like? So,
well, no, I was actually referring to the death of the person, not the death of the body. But I loved everything.
Okay.
I loved everything you said, because as you were saying it felt the same. Because
it is the same. It is the same. It's the same thing, really. Yeah. The difference is that the body continues to function for a
Yes.
while. So yeah, you can either die before you die or die on physical death, one or the other.
Right.
But then people make something out of dying before you die, as if it's something that's like, it becomes like another kind of enlightenment. It's amazing. I wish I could die before I die.
Right.
And it's not what you think it is at all.
Yes.
Like the suggestion is, people often have a concept, they think, and whatever concept you have about what's being shared here for the last hour, it's not it. Because if you can hold it as a concept, then it's not, it's unknowable. It's totally unknowable. Completely, totally and utterly unknowable. And also stunningly simple and ordinary. It's just already the case. But as regards what's after death, if you mean that the death of the individual,
Yes.
it's totally indescribable.
Yes.
It's totally ordinary, totally indescribable, because it's in the exact same way that I can't describe to you what's appearing to happen now. I could try. I could say that there's, the microphone here, and it's going through the amp thing, and it's the certain quality in my headphones, and how I feel sitting on the seat, and what I can see on the screen. It's all just words.
Yes.
It's indescribable. It feels like it's noble and describable to the person. So what do you mean it's indescribable? It's just, there's a computer, it's da-da-da-da-da, but it's just what appears to happen, and it's all energy. It's very simple and ordinary, but it's not knowable or describable. And what you'll see then is, when there's a clear communication, an uncompromising clear communication from nobody, in the meetings, you'll often get somebody, like frequently you'll get someone saying, I get it. I get what you were saying. As in, I don't feel like a person anymore, and they won't be able to describe it.
Right.
So then they'll say, there'll be a lot of laughter, because I can't, now I get why you continually said you can't describe it, because it's apparently happened here, although nothing happened, and I can't even tell it to you.
Right.
But yet that makes it sound special,
Yes, yes.
Yeah. It's not special. I think that's the one, that's usually what I kind of hammer home, is there's a real feeling as a person that you're looking for something, and that something is somehow special, because the feeling of being a person is that dualism of special, not special, ordinary, extraordinary. And the quite shocking thing is, it's not at all special what you're looking for. It's stunningly ordinary, because it's already just whatever appears to be, and it's just that is overlooked continually, because you feel like a person who's looking for something else that's around the next corner. So there's like a continual rejection of what's looked for by the person in favor of what might be. And it's kind of a hopeful energy of what might be. And that's why this is a hopeless communication. You see.
Right.
It's got to be hopeless. Of
Right,
course
right.
it's got to be hopeless, because if it's not hopeless, then if there's some sort of hope in it, then that's somehow feeding the individual about something that might happen to them, or might, it's all in the story then.
Right. Right. Well, that's actually a good place to end, I think.
Yeah, it was really lovely speaking to you, Hale. Yeah, that was nice.
Yeah, it was
conversation.
fun. Thank you. I really enjoyed it. It was
yeah.
It just was a very clear pointer to what's indescribable.
yeah, it's stunning. When it's not coming from somebody who knows something, it's totally energetically different. It's
Yes.
boundless.
Yes.
And that people sense that there's a real openness to that now, I think, more, especially in the last few years.
Yes.
There's a real openness to that energy of not being spoken to from somebody in that,
Yes.
from a point of knowledge. Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Kenneth Madden. You can learn more about Kenneth at kennethmadden.net. That's KENNETHMADDEN.net. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe so you have immediate access to future episodes. Please give us a 5-star rating and share it with the people you care about. If you'd like to learn more about my work, my mentor Lester Levenson's work, and the Sedona Method, please visit www.sedona.com. As you explore our site, you learn the key to lasting happiness, success, peace, and emotional well-being. We have books, courses, events, and plenty of free material to explore. Again, go to sedona.com. That's SEDONA.com. Thank you for being here, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Letting Go and the Greatest Secret.